Okay, so welcome guys. This probably would be the last session of TestNG. I'm hoping to complete today. So in the previous session, we
How about the
have.
browser? We can see like after.
Hello, guys. Am I audible and is my screen visible?
Yes, Rahul.
Okay.
Yeah, you are audible and screen is visible.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So I think we lost me here. Anyways, we will continue. So in the previous session, we started with Maven and TestNG. We saw what is the usage of Maven in our automation. We also saw how to read value from Excel and use it for our parameterization. Then we started TestNG. We understand what TestNG is, and we saw some of the annotations of TestNG. We saw the different hierarchy, the execution hierarchy in TestNG, some assertions, depends on methods, grouping, and priority. Okay, so today we will see a few other topics of TestNG, which is data provider, parameters, listeners, and retry. Okay, so we will try to cover all of these topics, hopefully today.
Hello.
Yeah, Mihir.
Yeah. So we can check after the session gets completed.
Yes, yes,
Okay, we will see
yes. Don't worry.
if we have time.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if you remember that in the previous session we had this one Java class file which we had created, and we had some assertions added into it, correct? And based on the priority, these methods were getting executed. Okay. So let me run this first and just to have a quick recap. So this is our TestNG XML file where we have mentioned which Java class file needs to be executed. Okay, so let me execute this and then we will start with today's coding. Okay, so here as you can see on the console, these values are printed, and the TestNG result shows test 4 got executed and it got passed. Test 3, test 1 got executed after that, and both of them have failed, and test 2 has been executed in the end and it has got passed. So 2 have passed and 2 have failed, right? And the order of execution was based on the priority that we had mentioned. So priority -1 would be executed first, so that is why test 4 got printed. Then the second one was the priority 0, meaning if we don't mention any priority it would be considered as 0. So after 4, test 3 got printed, then test 1, and then test 2, right? So if you see this on console, test 4, 3, 1 and 2, these things were printed. So basically we just did a simple print statement, and we added some assertions just to make some of them as passed and some of them as failed. Okay, so now let us see what is data provider. Okay, so data provider actually is a way wherein you can parameterize your TestNG script. Okay, so I will tell you how. So we have this data provider, the annotation in TestNG, which you can use. Okay, and here you can mention something like this: public object. Okay, so it returns an object, so that is why we have mentioned it as object. Okay, and here you have to mention the data provider name. Okay, so it can be anything. Let me put it as data set. Okay, 1, let's say. So this is the method that I'm creating. This is the TestNG annotation that I have mentioned over here. Okay, this is the return type, which is object. Okay, and I will create this method now. Set one. Okay, so now what I will do is I will create an object array. Okay, and let's say I name it as dataset1 or whatever. Okay, and I will say equal to new object. Okay, and I will say how many rows and how many columns I want in it. Okay, so this is what it is, and then here I will say dataset1 zeroth row and zeroth column. Okay, and I will say what is the value for it. Let's say username or user123, whatever. So I'll explain you the code. Let me just write it first, and then I will explain if you have any doubts. Okay. So what I've done here is I've used this DataProvider annotation, TestNG annotation here, and what I'm doing is I have created a method by the name dataset1, and this method returns a object array, okay, which is a multi-dimensional array, as you can see here. Okay, and inside this I have created an object array. I've initialized it, and I've mentioned that it would return one row and one column. Okay, and here like for example, let me open an Excel and show you. So let's say this is the value that I have stored in an Excel. Okay, so the zeroth index row, which is nothing but the first row, and zeroth column, which is nothing but column 1 in this case. What is the value here? It is user123. And then in the zeroth row again, in column index 1, which is column B, what is the value that I have stored? It is pass123. Okay, so the first index denotes the row and the second index denotes the column. Okay, so in zeroth row and zeroth column, meaning this one, okay, zeroth row and zeroth column, what is the value that I have stored? It is user123. And in zeroth column, zeroth row and column 1, what is the value that I have stored? Zeroth row and column 1, what is the value that I've stored is pass123. Okay, so rather than using an Excel, I am storing this value in a data provider. Okay, and I will now use this data provider in my test to use or to use these values in my script. Okay, so I will show you that now. So now let's say I mention here return dataset1. Why? Because I have mentioned here that I am going to return an object array, right? So what is the object array that I have defined here? Dataset1. So that is the object that I am going to return when I call this particular function. Okay, so any questions here, like what I'm doing here? So I'm basically just creating an object array, storing certain values in it, and I'm returning that array in this particular method, and this is possible by using a data provider annotation of TestNG. Okay, so you already know how to create an array, right? So we have already seen that in our Java basics session. So instead of creating a string array or an integer array, what I have created as an object array, and this is not a single dimensional array but a multi-dimensional array which will have a row and a column. So row will also start with index 0 and column will also start with an index 0. Okay, and I am storing values in those particular row and column indexes, and then I'm returning that object array. Okay, so it is as simple as that. Okay, so now this data provider is ready. So now how do I use these values in my test? Okay, so now this is a test, right? So if I want to use this data provider in my this particular test 1, okay, so I have to write something like this. Okay, so inside this test annotation I have to mention data provider, okay, equal to, in double quotes, the data provider, this particular method name. Okay, so I'll mention it as data set 1. Okay, and how many values would I use from this data provider? So there are two values, right? This one and this one, correct? So now what I'll do is I will mention here, let's say string, I mention UID, string PWD, which indicates basically user ID and password. And what I'll do is, for now I'll just simply print the value that I'm trying to access. Okay, and obviously in real-time scenario, let's say if I have something like a login method that I have created, driver.findElement.sendKey. So in that case, I would use this UID variable in that send keys section. Okay, but for now I'm just printing it over here as a statement. Username is so and so and password is so and so. Okay, so now if I execute this, let us see whether it works fine.
I think due to SSN, it will get failed test 1. Asset true false.
Sorry?
Fail or it is over?
No, it got executed. Test 1 has index 1 out of bounds for length, array out of bound. Okay, array out of bound. Try this. Let's try again. Okay, so here as you can see, it has printed the value username is user123 and password is 123, and it has tried to print it the other time, but the second index doesn't have any value, so that is why it has printed as null. Let me add some more over here. Let's say I print, or I have value 3, 4, 5, let's execute this now.
Change row name,
Sorry?
row number. In index, change row number.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yeah. So now what has happened is I have these two values, okay, in row number 0, column number 0, this is the value. Then in row number 0, column number 1, this is the value. So for example, the same scenario, right? So what I'm doing here is I've added one more row, user 345 and pass 345, right? So the first iteration, it will pick 0th row and 0th column, this is the value. Then the second would be 0th row and first column, this is the value, pass 1 2 3. Then first row 0th column, which is user 345, and then first row first column, which is pass 345. So as many times if I add these rows and column combination, those many times this particular method will be executed, right? So now if you see in the console window also, let me expand this. So you see test1 has been printed twice, and then this obviously the value has been extracted accordingly. So if I have to execute, a login method with different combination of username and password, right? So what I would do is I would use this data set, and I would have all those combinations mentioned in this data set, okay, and driver.findElement, whatever value that it would enter those many times, as many combinations I have mentioned in this data set or this data provider, you can say. Okay, so in the previous session we had seen how to parameterize using the Excel sheet. This is another way using a TestNG annotation called as DataProvider, where you can store your test data and you can use it to iterate through that data provider for a particular test annotation, and those many times that particular test annotation or the code inside it would be executed.
Rahul, I have one doubt here, Rahul.
Yes.
Why it didn't execute, Rahul, when we give object 1 of 1?
Yeah, 1 of 1, right? Let's see. Okay. So it says, if you go to the result and if you see this particular thing, it says Java runtime exception, array out of bound exception, index 1 out of bound for length 1. Okay. So let me comment this first. Let's see. I think this should work.
We have to keep 0 or 1 because we are considering row 0 index 1.
Yeah, let's see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I understand here is this particular value that we mention, it mentions how many rows and how many columns we want to use. Okay, so here when I mention 1 and 1, so basically what it means is that I'm using one row and one column. Okay, so basically it will store only this value. Okay, user 123. Okay, if I say something like this, wherein I mention
Rahul, can you mention 0 and 1?
1 second here.
No, 0 and 1.
0 and 1 where?
Yeah, in place of 1 and 1.
0 1 like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Now you can execute.
Okay.
Test 1 also. Modify.
Sorry. So I believe it has again failed with array out of bound exception. Yeah. So what I understand here is this value that we mention here, it basically tells you how many rows and how many columns you want. Okay, so when I say 1 and 1, one row and one column is what I want. So basically it would be this one row and this one column, which is at index 0 0. It would store only this value, user 123. Okay, let's say if I mention one row and two columns, okay, in that case it would use 0 0 and 0 1. Okay, so basically one row and two columns, right? So it would be 0 0 and 0 1. Okay, so now if I execute this, it should work fine again. Okay, so let's try this.
Method we need to change. Method we need to change.
I'm sorry.
Method we need to give password also, Rahul.
Method.
Dobra.
Okay. One second. No, but why it didn't print this?
Password we need to give.
Okay, okay, yeah. String pwd. Okay, so let's execute this. Yeah, so now if you see, it has printed the username and password also, right? So basically this is nothing but the count of the rows and column, it is not the index. And whereas over here we mentioned the index. Okay, so now if I say row is 1 and column is 2, so that means it will take 0 0 and 0 1. Okay, if I say here 2 rows and 2 columns, so that would allow me to use 0 0 0 1 and 1 0 and 1 1 combination also. So now if I execute this, it has picked up both these values, user 123 pass 123 and user 345 and pass 345. Okay, so that was about data provider. There's one more way where you can use parameterization in TestNG instead of data provider. What you can also do is, there is this annotation called as parameters. Okay, so now let's say I remove this data provider from here. Okay, and what I would do is, I would say
1 minute, Rahul, again, right? I can take a screenshot.
sorry.
Press control. I can take it. I want a screenshot. Yeah, 1 minute. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I think some last session somebody had given a good suggestion that I can upload this code on GitHub repository or something, and I can share that link so that you can actually download this code on your local machine. So
Yeah, so
yeah.
sure.
I forgot that last time. I'll try to do it today for this particular session. Okay. All right. So shall we move ahead?
Yeah, sure, Rahul.
Okay. So instead of data provider, I'll show you another way how you can use parameters. There is this annotation called as parameters. Okay. And to use this parameters annotation, I have to mention over here in XML file something called as parameter. Okay, and here I have to mention the name of the parameter and the value. So let's say I mention first name. Sorry, is somebody saying something? Okay. So here what I'm doing is basically I'm storing the parameter name and the value in the testng.xml file. Guys, can you go on mute? Actually, I'm hearing some background noise, so if you're not speaking, I request all to go on mute. So here, as I said, I have used this parameter, tag or whatever in XML file, and there is this option called as name and value, where you can store the name of the variable, you can say, and its value. Okay, and in the test, what you can do is you can use this annotation called as parameters. Okay, and here you can say the value of the variable which you have stored here. Okay, and then here you can say the same thing. Okay, something like this. So now what I've done is, instead of using this data provider, I've used this parameter tag in my XML, which allows me to store a key value pair combination. So in the name, I've used the variable name as first name, value I've stored as Rahul, and then I've used another parameter combination with the variable name as last name. Okay, last name and value as comma. Okay. And here in my test, wherever I want to use that parameter value, I have used this annotation called as @parameters. In a round bracket, I have opened a curly braces, and in double quotes separated by comma, I have called those variable names which I have stored in the testng.xml file. Okay, and then those values I am using here in my input parameter for this particular method. Okay, I think I have to use this. One second. And then the input parameter would be used inside the method, to do whatever you want to do with that. So you can print it, or you can use it in some .send keys method or whatever. Okay, so now let me execute this and show you. So as you can see, this test1 method was able to successfully fetch the value from the testng.xml file where we had those parameter tag included, and in the test method, using this parameters annotation, we have referred to those values or the variables which we have mentioned in the testng.xml file. We have passed that as an method arguments or input parameter, and then we have used those input parameters or arguments inside the method to print this particular statement. So this is again another way of parameterizing your script, one which we had seen in the previous session using Excel, and today we have seen using DataProvider or by using this parameters annotation. Okay, so we will move ahead if there is no question on this, because TestNG listeners is a little bigger topic than this. Okay, so let's proceed, or do you have any questions? Okay, so I take it as a no. So let's start with TestNG listeners. 1 second. So TestNG listeners, so by the name itself you must have got an idea what exactly it does. So this TestNG listeners will actually listen, in kind of a sense, it will listen to what the execution is happening, and based on the output of the execution, let's say a particular method passes, or let's say a particular method fails, or at the beginning of the script or at the end of the script, whatever is happening, it listens to it, okay, and accordingly it will have certain methods which you can use to perform certain operation. Okay, so I will show you one TestNG documentation. Okay, this is for retry, but anyways, this documentation is quite helpful. I would highly recommend you guys to go through it. In testng.org, you can just mention it on Google TestNG documentation. You will get this particular link, and you will have all possible options that are there in TestNG with its documentation mentioned over here. Okay, so we will see this documentation also for our next topic, which is retry, but for now I'll show you what is TestNG listeners. So let me see. Yeah, so TestNG listeners, so there are several interfaces that allow you to modify TestNG's behavior. These interfaces are broadly called TestNG listeners. Here are few listeners: I annotation transformer, I annotation transformer 2, and there are quite a few of them. In this example, we will use this iTest listener interface, and using this, we would use the methods that are available in this interface, to perform certain operation. Okay, so we will use this iTest listener interface. Okay, so first of all, let me create a new class. Okay, I would name it as TestNG listeners. Okay, so I've created this class, and I want to use this interface which I've just mentioned over here, iTest listener, right? So how would a class use the methods of an interface? You remember inheritance concept, right? Extends and implements. So if you want to use inheritance from a different class, you use extends keyword, right? But since this is an interface, I would have to use implements keyword. Okay, so implements iTest listener, and it says import iTest listener from org.testng. So I will do that. And now this particular error says add unimplemented methods. So again, if you remember our Java basics session, right? So if you implement an interface, you have to implement all the methods that are available in that interface, right? So I would say add unimplemented methods. So now you see, you get a, probably I think 5 to 6 methods that are implemented in this particular class. Okay, so what this does, that on a particular event, okay, this listener would listen to the execution, and on a particular event it will trigger these methods. Okay, and whatever code that you write inside these methods would obviously get triggered whenever these methods are called automatically. Okay, so you don't have to do anything specific to trigger this code. It will be done by this TestNG listener interface. Okay, so now let's go through what are these methods which are available. So one is called as onTestStart. Okay, so again the name is self-explanatory. So whenever a particular test annotation, like for example here, how many test annotations are there? I think 4 of them, right? So whenever a particular test annotation gets triggered, this particular code will be executed first. Okay, meaning if I say test has started, okay, so this particular statement will be printed before any of these test gets triggered. Okay, so for example here, what was the order of execution? Test 4 will be executed first because it is priority -1, right? So before this statement gets printed, system.out.println test 4, you will see this statement getting printed. Why? Because this is inside this onTestStart method of iTestListener. Okay, as simple as that. Similarly, there is something called as onTestSuccess. So I can say test has passed. OnTestFailure, I can say test has failed. I can say here test has skipped. Okay, then there is this method called as onTestFailed but within success percentage. So if there is any percentage that you have mentioned, that if that particular test has, let's say, 5 assertions, okay, and out of that, if let's say or maybe it has 4 assertion, and out of it that, let's say, 2 have passed and 2 have failed, right? So the passing percentage for that particular method is 50, right? And if you have mentioned that the pass percentage here is, let's say, 50, right? So then it would execute this particular method. Okay, on test failed but within success percentage. Okay, so I would not mention that for now because we don't have any method which fits this criteria. And then we have this on start and on finish. So that would basically mean whenever the execution starts at the very beginning, this particular statement will be executed. So it will, I can say execution has started, and when the complete execution is ended, I can say execution has finished. Why? Because this particular method will be triggered at the very end. Okay, so now currently I have just mentioned this print statements, but generally what we do is, especially on test failure, we use a concept of taking screenshot, right? So generally when a particular test fails, we expect the framework to capture screenshot so that we can see why it has failed, right? So we use that. So we will see that when in our framework sessions, so don't worry about it. But for now, just to understand what test listener is, just see when this particular statements are getting printed. Okay, so you have done this TestNG listeners, you have mentioned, you have created this class, you have implemented this iTest listener, and then you have also implemented its methods, right? So now one more thing that you need to do here is, in this testng.xml, you have to use this listeners tag, okay, and inside that you have to use this listener tag, and here you have to mention the class name. Okay, so what is the class name? Class name is testng listeners.java, right? And it falls under which package? It falls in under testng package. So testng dot, what is the class name? Testng listeners. So what this will do basically, it will first understand what is the listener that it needs to trigger or use basically, and then it will execute the class that you have mentioned over here. Okay, so testng.assertions, for example, right? So now in this testng.assertions, whenever a particular method passes or fails, or whenever a test gets triggered, the subsequent or the corresponding methods in this test listener will be also triggered. Okay, so now we will see that, so that you can understand what I'm trying to explain. So here, how many tests are there? We have test 1, test 2, test 3 and test 4, right? Out of which I believe 2 will pass and 2 will fail, correct? So accordingly, the methods inside this testng listener would get triggered, and it will print those values in the console. Okay, so let's execute this testng.xml again. Okay, so the execution is completed, and as you can see, there are some more statements that have been printed here. So what is the first one? It says execution has started, right? And what is in the end? Execution has finished. Why? Because in testng listeners file, we have implemented this iTest listener method on test start, on start and on finish. Which, what does it do? It prints basically execution has started and execution has finished. Okay, so that is why you see this in the very beginning and this at the very end. Okay, similarly, on test start, what it should print? Test has started, correct? On success, it should print test has passed. On failure, it should print as test has failed. Okay, so let's go back to our console. So test 4 has started. So before that, it has said test has started. Similarly, for test 3, it has said test has started. Test 1, again it has said test has started. And for test 2 also, before that it says test has started. So now, out of these 4, which all have passed and which all have failed? So test 4 and test 2 have passed. Okay, so if you go back to the console, so test 4, it says test has passed, and for test 2, it has said test has passed. Why? Because these two methods have actually passed, right? So whatever we have mentioned in the testng listener methods for success, that particular code would get triggered. In this case, we have just printed a statement called as test has passed. Similarly, test 3 and test 1 has failed. So you can see test 3 it has said test has failed, and for test 1, after printing whatever that parameterized value which was there inside that method, it has said test has failed. Okay, so it's very simple. So listener will actually help you perform a specific task based on the outcome of that particular test. Okay, so one example that I told you is whenever a particular test fails, we generally trigger this code for capturing the screenshot. Okay, so that particular code we can implement over here, and in the framework, whenever test fails, it will take a screenshot and have it as a proof of our execution. Okay, any questions guys so far for TestNG? I think it's pretty simple, right?
Yeah, why test 3 and test 1 has failed?
Because Mihir, we have done this assertion, right? In our previous session, we have intentionally made them
Okay,
fail. Assert true, I have intentionally, returned the value as false, right?
okay,
So,
okay,
yeah, so that is why it
okay,
has failed.
okay,
Yeah,
got it. Yeah.
and like assert equals this one, I have intentionally given two wrong values, so these are not
Okay, they are
equal
not
values.
equal.
Correct.
Okay,
So this
got
will
it.
fail
Yeah.
and this will pass, right? So this we had
Okay,
already seen in our previous session,
okay, got
right?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was about TestNG listener using this interface called as iTest listener. Okay. So now let's say there is this requirement sometimes that a particular test might fail because of synchronization issue. Let's say the browser was not loaded on time or whatever. Okay, so if you want, in such scenarios, or maybe in general, if a particular test fails, rather than directly recording it as fail, you want to retry executing that same test again, just to check whether it passes for the second time or not. Okay, so it is like you are giving that particular test another chance to execute and pass. Okay, you don't want to immediately mark that test as failed. Okay, so that is possible by using the retry mechanism in TestNG. So let's say for example, you know here what we had seen, you know let me maximize again. Test 3 and test 1 have failed, right? So in one execution itself, it has marked this as failed, correct? But if I use this retry mechanism, and if I say the retry count here would be let's say 3, okay, so what it will do is it will retry 3 times. It will execute this 3 times to check whether it has passed or not. Okay, let's say in the second retry attempt it passes, then obviously it will not retry for the third time, and then it will mark this as pass. Okay, but let's say it retries for all the 3 times, and for the entire 3 retry it has failed, then it will come out and it will say that it has failed. Okay, so basically this retry concept or the retry mechanism is pretty useful in because sometimes it is a false failure, right? Because the functionality is working fine, it is just that sometimes the page doesn't load properly or whatever, correct? And that is just a temporary issue. If you retry it, the application works absolutely fine. So rather than reporting it as a failure, and you know then manually when you check, you find that it works fine, right? So instead of that, we use this retry mechanism, so that the automation script itself will try to do it one more time, or as many number of times you have mentioned, and if it works, then it would mark it as pass instead of fail. Okay, so now we will see this how this retry works. Okay, So let's first go to the documentation. And again, as I said, I really recommend all of you to go through this document because it is very useful. I myself use this. Okay, and at times you just simply have to kind of uh, copy paste the code. You don't have to even do much about it. You just have to copy paste it, just like what I'm going to do now. Okay, so here it says, again, I'm not going to read the entire stuff, but basically you will just see what it says briefly. So every time tests fail in a suite, TestNG creates a file called testngfail.xml in the output directory. This XML file contains the necessary information to rerun only these methods that failed, allowing you to quickly reproduce the failures without having to run the entirety of your test. Okay, so what it means is that whenever a particular test fails, those test method name is getting stored in testng-fail.xml file, which gets created in your output directory. And if you use this retry mechanism, these methods that are mentioned in this .xml file would be re-executed once more, so that you can quickly reproduce the failures without having to run the entire regression suite or the entire suite again. Okay, so this is what basically it does. Okay, so now I'll tell you how this works. Okay, I'll just copy paste this code and then I will explain what it means. Okay, so I will say I will create a class, Java class. I will mention it as my retry. Okay, and I will just simply copy paste this code. Okay, and again it is using an interface called iRetry analyzer. I will import this, add unimplemented method, so that I've already done. I'll remove this override annotation. Okay, so now what basically it does, we have basically used a retry count variable. Okay, retry count will be 0 in the beginning, and maximum retry count here is 3. Okay, so this basically will mention how many times you want to retry a particular failed method. Okay, so if I put it as 4, it will retry those many number of times. So let me keep it as 3. So here what will happen is that this particular method will be called whenever a particular test has failed. Okay, and it will count how many times it has retried for that failed method. Okay, and the retry count, as I said initially, the value is 0. Okay, so it will first check whether 0 is less than the maximum retry count, which is 3. If yes, it will go inside it, it will increment the retry count value, and it will do it those many number of times until this particular condition returns false. So meaning when the retry count has already reached 3, okay, so it has already retried 3 times, and when 3 is not less than the maximum retry count 3, it will no longer go ahead. Okay, and the test execution for that particular method will stop, and whatever the output is, whether it is pass or fail, it will report it in the TestNG result. Okay, so this is just a simple basic my retry logic, which I have simply copy pasted it, right? So you don't have to really rack your brain how to do that. You just have to copy paste this one. Okay, and now let's go to this assertions where a particular method is already failing, right? So this one fails, you know that, right? So what I will do is, inside this test annotation, I would say retry analyzer, okay, equal to the class which you have used for the retry logic, which is nothing but my retry dot class. Okay, so what I've basically done is, if I know this particular specific test might fail because of synchronization issue or whatever, and I want this particular method to get a chance to re-execute, you know, more than one time, I can mention simply this retry analyzer in this test annotation and mention the class file name which has that retry logic. In my case it is my retry.java, right? So I've just mentioned my retry.class. I've saved this, okay, and we will see now whether this test3 gets executed 3 times or not. Okay, and this is obviously going to fail no matter how many times I execute this, right? Because here I've hard coded the assertion values. Okay, so but just for our understanding, we will see whether this is getting executed thrice. Okay, so I will execute this. Okay, so this has executed 7 times. You remember there are only 4 tests. So earlier it was executing only 4 times, right? Now it has executed 7 times, so 3 times extra, right? So why? It is because of this retry logic. And if you see here, this test3, this is test3, right? So if you see in this TestNG result, test3, it was executed once. It says assertion error. So it has skipped. You see this yellow tag is basically indicating skip. So it has not marked it as failed immediately like it was doing it earlier. So the first failure it has skipped, second failure it has skipped, third failure it has skipped, and the fourth time when it again failed, then it has marked it as failure, right? So this has been executed 3 times, and finally on the 4th time when it didn't pass, it has marked it as failed. You understood this logic, right? We have just mentioned the retry logic over here, and then we have just given the reference of that Java file to whichever test we think that needs multiple retry attempts in case of failure. Now the drawback here is you need to know in advance which test might need a retry logic. Okay, so that may not be the ideal scenario every time, right? So let's say I want to use this logic throughout my code. Whichever test fails, I want to give it a chance of retry for those many methods or tests, right? So for example, here there is another method that has failed, right? This test1, but this didn't get a chance for a retry. Why? Because I have mentioned it only over here. But what if I want to give it a chance throughout the entire suite? I cannot just copy paste this particular line in every test annotation, right? That may not be the best way to do it, correct? So in that case, one second. Yeah, so in that case, what I need to do is I need to use another interface called as iAnnotation transformer. Okay, so I will show you that. I would create again a new class, and let's say I call it as retry listener. So if you remember, this listener listens the entire execution, isn't it? So I would use this retry listener class to implement one TestNG listener interface called as I annotation transformer. Okay, I annotation transformer. I have to import the org.testng package, and here I have to simply implement the method that is there in the interface. Okay, and here what you need to simply do is I have to mention annotation dot set retry analyzer, and here I have to mention the retry logic which I have added in this particular class by the class name as my retry dot class. Okay, so you don't really need to bother what this particular method is, what are these different parameters it is using, so it's not really required. All that you need to remember is this is the interface that you need to implement. Automatically this particular method inside this interface you can add it by using add unimplemented method, and then inside this method you just have to add this line which says annotation dot set retry analyzer, and inside that you have to mention the Java class file name where you have added your where you have implemented your retry logic. Okay, so earlier what you have mentioned is you have mentioned the Java class file name inside a particular test annotation, right, which we saw some time back. But here you are doing this at a suite level using the TestNG listener interface called as iAnnotation transformer. So now if you see, there are these two methods that fail every time, right? Test3 and I believe test1, correct? So now you will see test1 also getting executed 3 times and test3 also getting executed 3 times. Okay, so no matter how many methods you add and no matter out of them how many methods fail, all those fail methods would be retried 3 times. Okay, so now let us execute this and see if this works. I think I missed something. 1 second. Oh yes, in testng.xml I forgot to mention the new listener which we have added, right? This iAnnotation transformer, I forgot to mention that. So we have already one listener for those success, fail, those kind of thing, right? And now I want to add this for retry, right? So what is that class name? It is retry listener, which falls under TestNG package, correct? So now there are 2 listeners in my project, and now let me execute this. All right, so let's maximize this. So in the console, let us first see how many have been executed in total. 10. Okay, out of that 2 have failed, which we know which ones are those, right? Test1 and test3. And how many have skipped? 6, and you know the reason why, right? So whichever has failed, it has got a chance to execute 3 times. So test1 has got chance to execute 3 times, which have got skipped, and test3 has also got a chance to execute 3 times, which again have got skipped. So in total 6 times or 6 tests have been skipped. And if you see here the execution also, test1 has been executed 3 times, correct? And similarly, test 3 has also got executed 3 times and it has printed whatever we have mentioned. And if you go to the TestNG result also, you will see test 3 executed 3 times and finally on the 4th time it has failed. Test 1 also has executed 3 times and finally on the 4th time it has failed. Okay, so this retry logic you can implement it at suite level by using this I annotation transformer interface and adding this particular listener in the testng.xml file, right? You mentioning that listener class name over here. And if you don't want to do it at suite level, you can simply mention the my retry class file in the test annotation itself, and then only that particular test, in case it fails, will be retried the number of times that you have mentioned in your my retry logic. Okay, any questions, anyone? I think I have completed what I planned to cover today.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, me there. Like I have some questions related to retry mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm little bit confused. So like flow will be like first it will go into the I test transformer. Okay. First the retrieve listener file will be executed. Okay. And out of from that it will goes into the my retrieve.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And after that, it will goes into the class file. Like
Right.
suppose if we
Assertion.
have SSN, yeah. So suppose there are two file. Okay, let's say an example, SSN.java and SSN1.java. Okay, in which there are some matters.
Yeah, I understood your
Okay,
question.
one.
I understood your question. So basically,
Okay,
let's say instead of simply executing assertion, this, let's say I create another class, I mean the file, okay, and let's say I name it as whatever demo.java, okay,
yeah,
and I need to mention that demo.java over here also, isn't it? So
yeah,
only then the demo file will also get executed. And inside this demo.java, let's say there are, okay, let's do this practically and see so that you can get an idea. But I have understood
yeah.
your question.
Yes, like there are some matters in two different files, so it will be implemented on both file retrieve
Yes, yes, yes.
mechanism or
It will be implemented at test suite level. Okay. So let's do this in demo.java. So here, if you see,
yeah.
I've created these two methods and let me fail one of them. Okay.
Okay.
And let me pass one of them. So now your question is, I believe, Mihir, that will
Yeah.
this demo one also be retried 3 times?
Yes.
So my answer is
Yeah.
yes. Okay, because this uh, listener works at suite level. Okay, it works at the
Okay.
suite level, not at the
Okay.
test level or class level. Okay, so now
Okay.
whichever class has any methods that fails, this retry logic should work on all of them. Okay, so now let's see, and
Okay.
let's see if what I understand is correct. Run as TestNG. see this. TestNG assertion. Why did the other execute?
File name is correct. TestNG.demo. Yeah.
Yeah, testng.demo, right? This is strange. Why? Because in our previous session we had seen, right, where two classes were
Yeah.
executed at the suite level. Test engine.
You note mention test annotation.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. Yes. So TestNG will pick those methods would
Yeah.
have test annotation, right? So thank you so much. Yeah, that was the issue. Okay.
Now we can run.
Yeah. So
Okay, good.
the script.
Now it will be like 15
Yeah.
and skip 9.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
if you see here, demo has also got executed 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you see
Yeah.
the result, demo has executed
Yes.
3 times.
Yes.
And
Got
then
it.
has
Yeah. And one more question. Will you please go into the my Java class file?
okay.
Yeah. Why you have removed that like override and add unimplemented method while you are like
Okay, so add
uh, cop-
unimplemented method, actually I had removed it because I had actually already implemented because I have copy pasted this thing, right?
okay,
So I
yeah,
copy pasted it and then again I clicked on that add unimplemented method. So it gave me another empty method by this public boolean retry thing. So that is why I removed that.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
So like method unimplemented method is also like same.
Yeah, it was same. It was same. So
Okay,
let me
okay,
show you. You see, it is the same. Okay, inside that
okay,
we have
got
to
it.
add that logic, so which I anyways
Okay,
had copied. Okay, so it
yeah,
is there in
yeah.
Java documentation, right? So I just use that and just
Okay. Okay. And one more, suppose in this file, like there is one variable that is max retry count, okay,
mm-hmm,
which is in final, like private static final.
mm-hmm.
So this variable will be used for that this class file only, right? And
Correct.
it is in like static final, so we cannot change the value of like max retry count
We
variable.
cannot change it at runtime basically. Yes, I can
Okay.
definitely change now, but at runtime you cannot change this value.
Okay, okay. And this variable will be used for this class only,
Correct,
class
correct.
file, right?
Yeah, because it is private. Yes, because
Okay,
I don't need to
got it.
use this variable anything anywhere outside this class, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, got it, got it. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it from my
Yeah,
side.
okay.
Like now, the problem is from which I've seen you previously.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
But
know
before
what.
that, if anybody else has any question on the topics that we covered
Yeah, yeah,
today?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We can
Ra-
complete.
Yes.
Rahul, in retry logic, you have mentioned return true, right? What is mean by return true? If it is,
So
if it
basically,
returns true,
yeah,
means it
yeah,
will
yeah,
execute.
yeah, yeah. So this is actually a flag used to make the TestNG listener understand that the retry count has not yet reached the maximum retry count. Okay, so if you see here, right, so if the retry count is less than maximum retry, only then it will return it as true. If it is not less than retry, it will return it as false. Okay, and when the listener gets this flag value as false, it will understand that the retry count has been achieved, or it has crossed the maximum retry count. Then it will not execute that method again, whichever has failed, right? It will execute only when this particular value has been returned as true. You got it?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
See, this retry method is returning a boolean value, either true or false. Okay, so what basically it is doing is, only if the execution enters this if statement, which is possible only when the retry count is less than the maximum retry. So when it goes inside this if statement, first of all it will increase the count of retry by 1, and then it will also return the value as true. This particular value will be then used by the listener to confirm that the maximum retry count has not yet reached, and then it will execute that failed method again. However, when the retry count finally is no longer less than the maximum retry count, it will not go inside this if condition, and then it will return the value as false. And when the retry listener gets the value as false, it will not trigger that method another time. Okay, does that make sense? Hello?
Yes, Rahul, understood.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then if no more questions, I think we are done with
Thank you, Rahul.
TestNG also. And hopefully
Thank you, Rahul.
tomorrow, yeah, thank you so much, guys. Hopefully tomorrow, if I get time, we will start with the framework. Okay, Cucumber framework using page object model design. Okay, so we will start that tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much, guys.
Tomorrow timing?
Yeah, guys, I'll tell you, because I'm having a very busy schedule at office. Sometimes I have to log in on weekends also. So I will let you know, like the way I did it today, just probably half an hour or 1 hour earlier, because I don't want to commit now something and then at end, if I get some call from office and I cannot conduct this session. So I don't want to repeat that, but I'll try my best to have it tomorrow. I'll let you know.
Okay, sure, Rahul. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.